The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of our Malibu home. But the sound was nothing compared to the words that had just shattered my world. "I'm leaving you, Veronica," Charles said, his voice carrying that same dismissive tone he used when discussing settlements with opposing counsel. "I've been seeing someone else." I stood frozen in my navy silk dress, the one I'd worn to celebrate our anniversary just 3 months ago, watching my husband of 35 years adjust his Hermès tie with the casual indifference of a man discussing the weather. "Who?" The word escaped my lips as barely a whisper. Charles turned to face me fully, his perfectly sculpted features the ones that had made him the most sought-after entertainment lawyer in Hollywood, set in cold determination. "Tasha Green. She's 21, a fitness influencer. We're in love." 21. I was 58. The math was brutal in its simplicity. "Charles, we can work through this," I heard myself saying, hating the desperate edge in my voice. "Whatever's happening, it's just a midlife crisis. We can." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "This isn't a phase, Veronica." He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 3 fingers of the Macallan I'd given him for Christmas. "You're brilliant, successful, everything a man should want in a wife, but you're not young anymore." The words hit like physical blows. I thought about the hours I'd spent at the gym, the treatments, the careful attention to diet and skincare. At 58, I was in better shape than most women half my age. I'd run marathons, climbed mountains, built a magazine empire, but none of that mattered against the simple arithmetic of age. "The prenup is clear," Charles continued, swirling his whiskey. "What's yours stays yours. What's mine stays mine. Clean break." I laughed then, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Clean break, Charles? I built your career. Every high-profile case, every media appearance, every carefully crafted public image. That was my work, my connections, my strategy." He shrugged, that elegant lift of shoulders that had once made my heart race. "And you were compensated well for it. Look around, Veronica. This lifestyle didn't come from my legal effies alone." He was right, and we both knew it. Charles Hale might have been the face that graced the covers of legal journals and society magazines, but Veronica Hale was the mastermind who orchestrated every move. I'd retired early from my position as editor-in-chief of Essence and Style magazine to support his ambitions, to raise our daughter, to be the perfect wife. I'd given up my own dreams to polish his. When, I asked, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Pacific. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of fire. Everything was burning. 6 months. 6 months. While I'd been planning our move to the Hamptons beach house, he'd been planning his exit strategy. While I'd been coordinating his appearance on Good Morning America, the one that had landed him the Warner Brothers contract, he'd been coordinating betrayal. "The irony is exquisite," I murmured, watching my reflection in the glass. "I made you everything you are, and now you're leaving me for someone whose entire career I could dismantle with a single phone call." Charles stepped behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Tom Ford Noir, another gift from me. Don't threaten her, Veronica. Tasha has nothing to do with our marriage failing." "Our marriage failing?" I turned to face him. "Charles, our marriage was perfect until you decided you needed a newer model." The pun wasn't lost on either of us. "I'm 59, he said quietly. "In Hollywood years, that's ancient. Tasha makes me feel young again." "And what happens when you're 70 and she's 32? When you're 80 and she's 40 to my age now?" Charles finished his whiskey, setting the glass down with finality. "I'll deal with that when it comes." The next morning arrived, with the mechanical precision of my shattered life attempting to maintain normalcy. Charles was already gone, probably to Tasha's Venice Beach apartment, I realized with bitter clarity. The house felt enormous and hollow, like a museum displaying the artifacts of a life that no longer existed. I sat in my home office, surrounded by mood boards and fabric samples from my latest project. For the past 2 years, I'd been secretly developing a lifestyle brand, something I'd dreamed about since my magazine days but never had time to pursue while supporting Charles's career. The sketches and prototypes were hidden away like guilty secrets, my creative outlet when the world of legal strategies and image management became suffocating. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira, my former colleague and closest friend. "Saw the TMZ story. Charles and his child bride spotted at Nobu. Very public, Very romantic. I'm coming over. I pulled up the article on my laptop. There they were. Charles in his perfectly tailored Armani suit, Tasha in a slip dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was beautiful in that effortless way that came with youth, glossy blonde hair, flawless skin, endless legs. Everything I used to be before time and gravity started their relentless campaign. The headline read, Power Couple Alert. Legal Eagle Charles Hale goes public with fitness sensation Tasha Green. Power couple. I'd created that power, stroke by strategic stroke. My phone rang. Elena, honey, I just saw the news. Mira's voice was fierce with protective anger. How are you holding up? Like someone who just discovered her husband has been living a double life for 6 months, I replied, scrolling through the comments. They ranged from sympathetic to cruel, but the theme was consistent, out with the old and with the new. What can I do? Want me to come over? We could get drunk and plot his social destruction. Despite everything, I smiled. Mira had been my deputy editor back when we both dreamed of changing the fashion world. She'd gone into boutique PR while I'd married Charles and stepped back from my career, but our friendship had remained unshakable. Actually, yes. Come over and bring wine. The expensive stuff. Charles is paying for it. 2 hours later, we sat on my terrace, watching the waves crash against the shore while demolishing a bottle of Chateau d'Yquem that had been aging in Charles's wine cellar. So what's the plan? Mira asked, her dark eyes sharp with calculation. She was 62, silver-haired, and fiercer than women half her age. Revenge? Public humiliation? I know people who could make his life very complicated. I don't know. I admitted. For 35 years, I've been Mrs. Charles Hale. I've been the wife, the supporter, the woman behind the man. I don't remember who Veronica is without him. I do, Mira said quietly. She was brilliant. She was fearless. She was the woman who convinced Calvin Klein to put a plus-size model on the cover of Vogue. She was the editor who launched careers and changed minds. She was the woman who didn't need anyone's validation to know her worth. That was a lifetime ago. That was 3 years ago, when you stepped down from the magazine. You're not dead, Veronica. You're just dormant. I stared out at the ocean, thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who had commanded boardrooms, who had shaped cultural conversations, who had been feared and respected in equal measure. Leela's senior show is next week, I said suddenly. My daughter was finishing her fashion design degree at Parsons. She's been begging me to come. Good. Go. Show your daughter that her mother is more than just a casualty of her father's midlife crisis. I don't know if I'm ready to be seen. The vultures will be circling. Everyone loves a good downfall story. Mira leaned forward, her expression intense. Then don't give them a downfall. Give them a comeback. That night, after Mira left, I stood in my walk-in closet, a space larger than most people's bedrooms, and really looked at my clothes for the first time in years. Rows of Chanel suits, Valentino gowns, Hermès scarves, all beautiful, all expensive, all chosen to complement Charles's image rather than express my own personality. In the back, behind the formal wear, I found a section I'd forgotten about, clothes from my magazine days. Bold colors, interesting textures, pieces with personality and edge. I pulled out a vintage Saint Laurent blazer, black with gold buttons, sharp-shouldered and powerful. It still fit perfectly. In the mirror, I looked like the woman I used to be. The woman who had taken meetings within a winter, who had discovered the next generation of fashion talent, who had never asked permission to take up space. Hello, Veronica, I whispered to my reflection. I've missed you. My phone buzzed with a text from Leela. Mom, I know things are hard right now, but please, come to my show. I need you there. And I have something to ask you. I typed back. I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. Not healing, that would take time, but something like possibility, fragile as a newborn's breath but undeniably there. Charles had said I was past my prime. Looking at myself in that blazer, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, my prime was still ahead of me. The fashion show was being held in a converted warehouse in downtown LA, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. The space buzzed with the chaotic energy that only comes from young creatives convinced they're about to change the world. I hadn't felt that particular electricity in years. Leela found me as soon as I arrived, looking stunning in one of her own designs, a deconstructed blazer dress that managed to be both edgy and elegant. At 25, She had inherited my eye for design and Charles's natural confidence, a combination that made her magnetic. Mom, she hugged me tightly, and I caught a whiff of her signature perfume, the same Chanel No. 5 I'd worn at her age. You look incredible. That blazer is perfect. Very powerful woman having her moment. Is that what I'm having? I asked, smoothing my hands over the St. Laurent. I wasn't sure if I was ready for public appearances yet. You're more ready than you think. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Leela's eyes lit up with the same excitement. I'd seen when she was 7 and convinced she could teach our golden retriever to paint. One of my models got food poisoning. I need someone to walk for my finale piece. My stomach dropped. Leela, I'm not a model. I'm 58 years old. Exactly. My collection is called Timeless Rebellion. It's about rejecting fashion's obsession with youth. I need someone who embodies that message, someone who proves that style doesn't expire at 30. Please, Mom, you're perfect. Before I could respond, a voice behind me said, she's absolutely right. I turned to find a man about my age, maybe slightly younger, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of deep brown eyes that suggested he'd seen enough of the world to find it both beautiful and heartbreaking. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but there was something about his presence that commanded attention. I'm sorry, I said. Do we know each other? Eli Navarro. He extended his hand. I'm photographing tonight's show. And your daughter is right, you'd be perfect for that finale piece. Eli Navarro. The name was familiar, floating somewhere in my memory from my magazine days. Then it clicked. You shot the Real Beauty campaign for Dove and the Harper's Bazaar cover with the 3 generations of mothers. Your work is extraordinary. He smiled, and I noticed the way it transformed his entire face. Thank you. And yours was pretty extraordinary too. I remember your editorial choices at Essence and Style. You featured more diverse faces than any other major magazine. You know my work. I know your reputation. In my industry, editors like you were legendary. Leela looked between us with barely contained glee. See? Even famous photographers think you should do it. The dress is gorgeous. It's this flowing champagne silk number that would look incredible with your coloring. And it's not a typical runway walk. It's more like a statement, a declaration. I stared at my daughter, this brilliant young woman who believed in me more than I believed in myself at the moment. Around us, models were getting ready, makeup artists were touching up faces, and the energy was building towards showtime. What if I trip? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if I look ridiculous? What if you don't? Eli interrupted gently. What if you walk out there and remind everyone that beauty isn't about youth? What if you show them what confidence looks like? Something in his voice, in the way he looked at me, not with pity or politeness, but with genuine respect, made me nod before I could second-guess myself. Okay, I said. I'll do it. The next hour was a whirlwind of preparation. Leela's dress fit like it had been made for me, flowing silk that moved like water and somehow managed to be both sophisticated and sensual. The makeup artist, a chatty woman named Ruby, kept my look natural but glowing. Your bone structure is insane, she said, contouring my cheekbones. Seriously, most women would kill for this facial architecture. In the mirror, I watched myself transform, not into someone younger, but into someone more myself. The dress, the lighting, the energy of the room, it all combined to remind me of something I'd forgotten. I was beautiful, not despite my age, but because of everything my age represented. Every laugh line told a story. Every silver strand in my hair marked a year of experience, of growth, of survival. You ready? Leela asked, appearing beside me in the mirror. I nodded, surprised to find that I meant it. The show began with a burst of music, something electronic and pulsing that vibrated through the concrete floor. I watched from the wings as Leela's models showcased her collection. The clothes were stunning, pieces that honored classic tailoring while adding unexpected elements of rebellion. A pinstriped blazer with cutout shoulders, a pencil skirt with a dramatic front slit, and punk rock hardware. These weren't clothes for news, they were power pieces for women who had something to say. Your turn, Eli said, appearing beside me with his camera. Just walk like you own the world, because tonight you do. The music shifted to something deeper, more dramatic. I heard Leela's voice over the sound system. Fashion has always been about transformation, but who decides when that transformation should end? My finale piece celebrates the woman who refuses to become invisible, who knows that style is eternal and power is ageless. Ladies and gentlemen, my mother, Veronica Hale. The spotlight hit me as I stepped onto the runway, and for a moment, I was blinded. But then my eyes adjusted, and I saw them, the audience, sitting forward in their seats, phones raised, attention focused entirely on me. I began to walk, letting the music guide my steps, letting the dress flow around me like liquid confidence. I wasn't walking like a 20-year-old model. I was walking like a woman who had lived, who had loved, who had been broken and was rebuilding herself piece by piece. I was walking like someone who understood that true beauty wasn't about perfection, it was about authenticity, about owning your story completely. The audience erupted. Not polite applause, but genuine enthusiasm. I saw phones flashing, people leaning forward, conversations starting. At the end of the runway, I paused, met the eyes of as many audience members as I could, and smiled. Not a practice smile, but a real one, full of surprise and joy and something I hadn't felt in months, pride. When I turned to walk back, I saw Eli in the wings, camera raised, and the look on his face was something I'd never seen before. Wonder, maybe, or recognition, as if he was seeing something in me that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Backstage, the energy was electric. Models, designers, and industry people surrounded me, all talking at once. You were incredible out there. Where have you been hiding? Have you ever considered modeling professionally? That walk was pure fire. I felt dizzy with adrenaline and disbelief. Leela appeared at my side, tears in her eyes. Mom, you were perfect. Better than perfect. You were transformative. Eli pushed through the crowd, his camera still in his hands. Veronica, I have to ask, would you be interested in doing a proper photo shoot? I'm working on a project about redefining beauty standards, and after seeing you out there, he shook his head. You're exactly what this industry needs. I don't know, I said, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. This was just for Leela. I'm not. Really, yes. Leela interrupted firmly. She's interested, right, Mom? I looked at my daughter, at this amazing young woman who believed in me so completely, and then at Eli, whose eyes held a professional excitement I recognized from my own magazine days. What would it involve? I asked. A day in my studio. Just you, me, and the camera. We'll create something beautiful, not because you're someone's wife or mother, but because you're Veronica Hale. Because you have something to say. Around us, the party was continuing, but I felt like I was in a bubble of possibility. 3 hours ago, I'd been a discarded wife hiding from the world. Now, people were telling me I belonged in it. Okay, I heard myself say, let's do it. Eli grinned, and I noticed he had a slightly crooked tooth. That made his smile more real, more human. Excellent. I'll call you tomorrow to set it up. As he walked away, Leela squeezed my arm. Mom, do you realize what just happened? I walked in a fashion show, I said, still not quite believing it. No, she said, her voice soft but certain. You just started your comeback. Eli's studio occupied the entire top floor of a converted firehouse in Silver Lake, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. I stood in the doorway, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't expected. This was different from the adrenaline-fueled spontaneity of the runway. This was deliberate, planned, intimate. Second thoughts? Eli asked, noticing my hesitation. He was setting up equipment, lights, reflectors, cameras that looked more sophisticated than anything I'd seen in my magazine days. Third and fourth thoughts, I admitted. I keep wondering what I'm doing here. 3 days ago, I was a divorced woman hiding in her Malibu fortress. Now I'm here for a photo shoot. It feels surreal. The best transformations usually do. He adjusted a softbox, testing the light with a handheld meter. Can I ask you something? When you were running the magazine, did you ever have shoots where the model was nervous? All the time. Even the most experienced ones got nervous. And what did you tell them? I smiled, remembering that the camera sees truth. So the only way to get a good shot is to be honest about who you are in that moment. Smart advice. He looked at me directly, and I was struck again by those thoughtful brown eyes. So who are you in this moment? I considered the question while he continued setting up. Who was I? Not Charles's wife anymore. Not the woman who'd spent years shrinking herself to fit someone else's vision of what she should be. Not the magazine editor either, though that felt like a closer approximation of my real self. I'm someone figuring out what comes next, I said. Finally, I'm someone who just remembered she's braver than she thought. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to capture. The first part of the shoot was awkward. I felt stiff, overly conscious of every angle, every expression. Eli was patient, talking me through different poses, adjusting lights, occasionally showing me shots on the camera's LCD screen. "You're thinking too much," he said after a particularly stilted series. "Tell me about the magazine. What did you love most about that work?" "The discovery," I said immediately. "Finding new talent, new voices, giving someone their first cover, their first major editorial spread. There's this moment when you realize you're not just documenting beauty, you're creating it, defining it." "Keep talking." I heard the camera clicking, but his conversational tone made it feel incidental. "I loved challenging expectations. The fashion world can be so narrow, so obsessed with the same type of beauty. But when you put someone unexpected on a cover, an older woman, a plus-size model, someone from a different background, and it works, it sells, it starts conversations." I felt myself relaxing, getting lost in the memory. That's when you know you're changing minds. You miss it. I didn't realize how much until now. The camera kept clicking, but I'd forgotten to be self-conscious. I told myself I was happy supporting Charles's career, being the perfect wife, but I think I was just scared. Of what? Of failing, of discovering I wasn't as good as I thought I was. It's easier to give up your dreams than to risk having them crushed. Eli lowered his camera and looked at me directly. "Can I tell you something? I shot covers for every major fashion magazine for 15 years. Won awards, worked with the biggest names, made more money than I knew what to do with. And then I burned out completely." "What happened?" "I realized I was just perpetuating the same impossible standards that make most women feel inadequate. Shooting 17-year-old girls digitally enhanced to look like perfect plastic dolls. I was part of a machine that told women they weren't enough." He picked up his camera again, but didn't raise it. "I walked away for 2 years. Traveled, taught photography to kids in underserved communities, figured out what I actually wanted to say with my work. And what do you want to say? That real beauty is complex. That it comes from experience, from survival, from the accumulation of all your joys and sorrows and triumphs. That a woman who's really lived is more captivating than any perfect young face." Something shifted in the room. The conversation, the light, the energy between us, it all aligned into something electric. "Let's try something," Eli said, raising his camera again. "I want you to think about that moment on the runway. Not the walking, but the feeling. That moment when you realize the audience wasn't just being polite, they were genuinely captivated." I closed my eyes, remembering the lights, the music, the feeling of owning my space completely for the first time in years. "There," Eli said, softly, and I heard the rapid click of the shutter. "That's it." We worked for another hour, the conversation flowing between shots. He told me about his travels, his work with young photographers, his plans for a gallery show featuring portraits of women over 50. I told him about my secret fashion brand sketches, my dreams of starting over, my fear that it might be too late. "It's never too late," he said, switching lenses. "Look at Vera Wang. She didn't design her first dress until she was 40. Laura Ingalls Wilder didn't publish her first Little House book until she was 65. Julia Child was 50 when she wrote her cookbook." You have a lot of statistics about successful older women. I have a lot of statistics about successful women, period. Age is irrelevant to talent, to drive, to having something important to say. When we finished shooting, Eli immediately started reviewing images on his computer. I watched over his shoulder as pictures of myself appeared on the screen, but they didn't look like me. Or rather, they looked like a version of me I'd forgotten existed. Confident, elegant, with eyes that held depth and intelligence. Beautiful not despite my age, but because of it. "These are," I started, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "These are you," Eli said simply. "This is who you've always been." One image in particular took my breath away. I was looking directly into the camera, a slight smile playing at my lips, my silver hair catching the light. I looked powerful, mysterious, completely comfortable in my own skin. "I want to send some of these to a friend," Eli said. "Jasper Wu. He's an editor at Modern Icon. He's been looking for faces that challenge conventional beauty standards." "I don't know," I said, the familiar fear creeping back. What if he's not interested? What if this was just a fluke? Eli turned to face me fully. "Veronica, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a great shot when I see one, and I know star quality when it's standing in my studio. These images are extraordinary. I looked at the screen again, at this woman who seemed to embody everything I wanted to be: confident, authentic, unafraid. What would happen if he likes them? I asked. Best case scenario? A magazine feature, maybe a cover. Worst case scenario? He says no thanks, and we try somewhere else. I thought about Charles, about the way he'd dismissed me so casually, about Tasha, with her perfect young face and Instagram following, about all the years I'd spent making myself smaller, quieter, less demanding. Send them, I said. Eli grinned and immediately began uploading files. I'll email them tonight with a pitch. Trust me, Jasper's going to love these. As I gathered my things to leave, Eli walked me to the elevator. Can I ask you something? I said as we waited. Why are you doing this? Helping me. I mean, you don't know me. Because I recognize something in you, he said thoughtfully. The same thing I see in all the women I photograph for this project. You've been told you're invisible, that your time is over. But you're not invisible to me. You're luminous. The elevator arrived, and as the doors opened, I found myself not wanting to leave this space where I'd felt so seen, so celebrated. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait to hear from Jasper. And in the meantime, you keep being exactly who you were in those photographs. And who is that? Someone who knows her worth, he said simply. Someone who's just beginning to understand her power. As the elevator descended, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. The woman looking back at me wasn't the broken, discarded wife who had arrived here this morning. She was someone else entirely, someone who was just getting started. My phone buzzed with a text from Leela. How did the shoot go? Are you feeling like a supermodel yet? I typed back. Not a supermodel. Something better. I'm feeling like myself. 20 minutes later, as I sat in traffic on the 405, my phone rang. Eli's name appeared on the screen. That was fast, I said, answering. I just heard back from Jasper. Eli's voice was electric with excitement. He wants to meet with you. Tomorrow, if possible. Veronica, I've never seen him respond to photos that quickly. He used the word revolutionary. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding. What does this mean? It means, Eli said, that Charles Hale has no idea what he just set free. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was smiling, not the polite, practice smile I'd perfected as a lawyer's wife, but something real and fierce and full of anticipation. For the first time in months, I couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Jasper Wu's office occupied a corner of the modern Icon building in West Hollywood, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city sprawling toward the ocean. At 38, he possessed the kind of sharp, angular features that photographed beautifully and the restless energy of someone constantly 3 steps ahead of the next trend. Veronica Hale, he said, rising from behind a desk cluttered with mood boards, fabric swatches, and what appeared to be every major fashion magazine published in the last 6 months. I've been following your career since your Essence and Style days. Your September 2019 issue, the one with 3 generations of Black women entrepreneurs on the cover, that was groundbreaking. Thank you, I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. Though I have to admit, I'm surprised you remember my editorial work. Are you kidding? That issue sold out in days. More importantly, it started conversations. That's what great fashion media does. It doesn't just show clothes, it shapes culture. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Which is exactly what I want to do with these photographs of you. He spun his laptop around, showing me the images Eli had sent. Seeing them again took my breath away. There I was, transformed not into someone younger, but into someone more authentically myself than I'd been in years. The response has been unprecedented, Jasper continued. I sent these to 5 key people in the industry yesterday. 3 of them called me within an hour. One used the word revolutionary. Another said, finally, someone who understands that beauty doesn't expire. And the 5th person, I asked. Jasper's expression darkened slightly, said I was having a senior moment and suggested I focus on commercially viable faces. But that's exactly why we need to do this. The fashion industry has convinced itself that women become invisible after 35. It's not just wrong, it's economically stupid. Women over 50 control 70% of the nation's wealth, but fashion marketing acts like they don't exist. I found myself leaning forward, caught up in his passion. This was the kind of conversation I'd missed, the intersection of commerce and culture, the power to shift narratives. What are you proposing? I asked. a 6-page editorial spread for our November issue. The new face of timeless, you, shot by Eli, styled in pieces that prove fashion doesn't have an expiration date. But more than that, I want you to write the accompanying essay about invisibility, about reinvention, about what it means to reclaim your narrative. The idea sent electricity through my veins. I haven't ridden professionally in 3 years, like riding a bicycle, Jasper said with a grin. Plus, I'm throwing a party next week for our contributing photographers, industry people, influencers, a few celebrities. I want you there as my guest. Consider it a soft introduction to the world you're about to re-enter. I left the modern icon offices with a contract in my purse and a strange mixture of exhilaration and terror in my chest. On the drive home, I called Mira. You did what? She shrieked when I told her about the magazine spread and the party. I signed a modeling contract, I repeated, still not quite believing it myself. At 58, I'm officially a fashion model. This is insane. This is wonderful. This is Jesus, Veronica. Do you realize what you've done? You've gone from discarded wife to fashion revolutionary in less than a week. Don't get carried away. It's one magazine spread. It's never just one magazine spread. Trust me. I know this industry. You're about to become the poster child for age-positive beauty. Are you ready for that? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The question haunted me for the rest of the week. Was I ready to be scrutinized, discussed, possibly criticized? Was I ready to represent something larger than myself? The party was held at a gallery in the Arts District, the kind of industrial chic space where exposed brick walls displayed photographs of impossibly beautiful people in impossible situations. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a black St. Laurent blazer over wide-leg trousers, silver jewelry that caught the light, my hair styled in loose waves that embraced rather than hid the silver. You look phenomenal, Eli said, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. He wore a charcoal suit that made his brown eyes even more striking, and I felt a flutter of attraction that caught me off guard. I feel like I'm wearing a costume, I admitted, like I'm playing dress up in someone else's life. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked, his voice low enough that I had to lean closer to hear him over the music. I see someone who spent 30 years perfecting the art of being what other people needed. And now, for the first time, you're just being yourself. Before I could respond, Jasper appeared with a woman in tow mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of bone structure that suggested either excellent genetics or an excellent surgeon. Veronica, I want you to meet Diana Westfield from Harper's Bazaar. Diana, this is the woman I was telling you about. Diana extended a perfectly manicured hand. The photographer's muse, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How refreshing to see someone embracing the older model trend. Very brave of you. The word brave hung in the air like a backhanded compliment. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the conversation. Well, if it isn't the runway sensation herself. I turned to find myself face to face with Charles and Tasha. My ex-husband looked every inch the successful attorney in his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, but there was something strained around his eyes. Tasha clung to his arm like a beautiful accessory, her youth and perfection so obvious it almost seemed like a parody. Charles, I said, proud that my voice remained steady. I didn't expect to see you here. Tasha's interested in expanding into fashion, he replied, his tone carefully neutral. We heard through the grapevine that you were pursuing new interests, modeling, Tasha said, her voice breathier than I remembered from the news interviews. It's so inspiring, you know? Like, age is just a number, right? The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Around us, I could feel other conversations quieting, people turning to watch this unexpected reunion. Absolutely, I replied with a smile, though I prefer to think of it as experience being valued rather than discarded. Charles's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, we should let you get back to your networking. As they moved away, I heard Diana whisper to her companion, messy divorce. He traded her in for the younger model. Literally, the comment hit harder than I expected, bringing back all the humiliation and self-doubt I'd been fighting. I excused myself and headed for the bathroom, needing a moment to regroup. In the mirror, under the harsh gallery lighting, I saw every line, every imperfection, every year that separated me from women like Tasha. The confidence I'd felt just moments ago evaporated like morning fog. Second thoughts? A voice said behind me. I turned to find a woman I didn't recognize, tall, elegant, with silver hair styled in a chic bob and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. I'm sorry? Gloria Benton. She extended her hand. I saw your little encounter out there. Charles Hale always was a fool, but trading you in for that child is a new level of stupidity, even for him. The name clicked. Gloria Benton, supermodel of the 70s and 80s, now a successful businesswoman and philanthropist. I'd profiled her once, years ago, for a feature on women reinventing themselves after 50. You know Charles? Entertainment. Industry, everyone knows everyone. But more importantly, I know you. That runway walk at your daughter's show has been the talk of every major agency in town. Really? Really? Which is why I'm here tonight. I run Moderna, a boutique modeling agency that specializes in women over 45. We're small, selective, and we're changing the conversation about beauty and age in this industry. She handed me a business card, heavy stock with elegant typography. I'd like you to come in next week, meet the team, see what we do, consider signing with us. I appreciate the interest, but I'm not sure I'm cut out for professional modeling. Tonight has been eye-opening. Gloria laughed, a rich sound that held decades of experience. Honey, I started modeling when Twiggy was considered revolutionary. I've been called too old, too ethnic, too opinionated, and too much trouble more times than I can count. You know what I learned? The people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones most threatened by your potential. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. That little girl on your ex-husband's arm, she's beautiful. I'll give you that, but she's also interchangeable. There are 10,000 just like her in this city. You're singular. You have something that can't be replicated or replace: substance, intelligence, depth. That's what real power looks like. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me alone with my reflection and a business card that felt like a door to a future I hadn't dared imagine. I returned to the party with renewed determination, but the evening continued to be a series of subtle slights and backhanded compliments. A photographer mentioned how brave it was to pursue modeling at my age. A fashion blogger asked if I was concerned about being a novelty act. A magazine executive wondered aloud whether the mature model trend would last beyond this season. By the time Eli found me on the gallery's rooftop terrace, I was questioning everything again. Rough night? He asked, joining me at the railing overlooking the city lights. I'm starting to wonder if this was a mistake, I admitted. Half the people in there think I'm a curiosity, and the other half are waiting for me to fail. And what do you think? I think I'm scared, I said, the honesty surprising me. I think I'm terrified that Charles was right, that I am past my prime, and this is all just an elaborate form of denial. Eli was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the sprawling city below. Can I tell you something? Every important change I've ever made in my life started with being scared. Leaving fashion photography for 2 years, terrified. Starting this project about mature beauty, convinced I was career suicide. But fear isn't the opposite of courage, it's the prerequisite. What if I'm not strong enough for this world? It's brutal, and I'm already vulnerable. Then you get stronger, he said simply. You surround yourself with people who see your value, and you ignore the ones who don't. You remember that every time someone tries to diminish you, it's because they're threatened by what you represent. I looked at him then, really looked at him. There was something in his expression, not pity, not even sympathy, but recognition. As if he saw something in me that I was still learning to see in myself. Jasper wants to move forward with the shoot next week, I said. Good. And Gloria Benton wants to sign you. I raised an eyebrow. You know about that? Fashion industry. Everyone talks to everyone. He smiled. What are you thinking? I considered the question, weighing the fear against the possibility, the potential for failure against the certainty of regret if I walked away. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that maybe it's time to stop playing it safe. Gloria Benton's office was nothing like I'd expected from a modeling agency. Instead of the sterile, intimidating atmosphere I remembered from my magazine days, Moderna occupied a converted loft in Santa Monica, all warm wood and natural light. The walls displayed photographs of women ranging from their 40s to their 70s, not trying to look younger, but celebrating the beauty that came with experience. Welcome to the revolution, Gloria said, leading me through the space. We represent 43 women, ages 45 to 82. Last year, our clients booked more campaigns than any other boutique agency in Los Angeles. We paused in front of a striking black and white photograph of a woman with close-cropped, silver hair and magnificent cheekbones. That's Carmen Rodriguez, 73 years old, booked last month for a Chanel fragrance campaign. The photographer specifically requested a woman who looked like she had stories to tell. It's incredible, I murmured, studying the images. Each face held a different kind of beauty, not the cookie-cutter perfection of traditional modeling, but something richer, more complex. The market is finally catching up to reality, Gloria continued. Brands are realizing that women over 50 aren't just consumers, they're tastemakers, influencers, the demographic with the most disposable income. But for years, advertising ignored them completely. She led me to a conference room where several other women sat around a polished table. I recognized two of them from their photographs on the wall, stunning women who carried themselves with the confidence that came from decades of living fully. Ladies, meet Veronica Hale, Gloria announced. You've probably seen the photos from her shoot with Eli Navarro. Honey, those photographs are stunning, said the woman I recognized as Carmen Rodriguez. You have that rare quality, you photograph like you've earned every line on your face. The industry needs more faces like yours, added another woman, Janet Liu, whose delicate Asian features had aged into something regal. Women who represent real life, real experience. Gloria took a seat at the head of the table. If you sign with us, Veronica, you'll be joining something bigger than a modeling agency. We're shifting the entire conversation about beauty and aging. But I have to be honest, it's not going to be easy. You'll face rejection, criticism, people who think you're delusional for trying this at your age. I'm getting used to that, I said, thinking of the party the week before. Good, because it's about to get more intense. Jasper called this morning. He wants to fast-track your editorial spread. They're bumping it to the October cover. My heart stopped. The cover? The cover, which means every major agency in town will see it. Every brand will have an opinion about you. Every blogger will have something to say. Are you ready for that level of scrutiny? I thought about Charles, about Tasha, about all the years I'd spent making myself smaller to fit into other people's expectations. Then I thought about that moment on the runway, about the way Eli's camera had seen me, about the feeling of being truly myself for the first time in decades. I'm ready, I said. The contract signing was surprisingly straightforward, a few signatures, initials on several pages, and suddenly I was officially represented by Moderna Model Management. As I left the office with my copy of the agreement, I felt like I was carrying proof of a new identity. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Gloria signed me to work with Marcus Chen, a photographer who specialized in what the industry called lifestyle shoots, real people in real situations, selling products through authenticity rather than aspiration. Forget everything you think you know about modeling, Marcus said during our first session together. We were shooting in a minimalist studio in Culver City, and I was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and jeans for a luxury skincare brand campaign. You're not trying to look like a model. You're trying to look like the most interesting version of yourself. It was harder than it sounded. Decades of conditioning had taught me to minimize myself, to be the supporting player rather than the star. Marcus and his team had to constantly remind me to take up space, to meet the camera's gaze directly, to own my presence in the frame. Stop apologizing for existing, Marcus said after a particularly stiff series of shots. You're selling confidence, wisdom, the idea that beauty gets more interesting with age. If you don't believe it, no one else will. Gradually, something clicked. I began to understand that this wasn't about pretending to be someone else, it was about being more myself than I'd allowed in years. The camera became less intimidating and more like a mirror, reflecting back a version of myself I was learning to embrace. That's it, Marcus said as I relaxed into a pose, my hand resting on my collarbone. My eyes looking directly into the lens was something that felt like serenity. That's the money shot. The skincare campaign was my first real booking. And when the images were released 3 weeks later, the response was immediate. The brand's Instagram post featuring my photograph received more engagement than any of their previous campaigns. Comments poured in from women thanking them for showing real beauty and asking where they could see more of that gorgeous silver-haired woman. You're trending, Mira announced, bursting into my kitchen where I was having morning coffee and trying to process the notifications on my phone. The hashtag real beauty relied has over 50,000 posts, and half of them are sharing your skincare ad. I scrolled through the comments, overwhelmed by the response. Women from their 40s to their 80s were posting selfies, sharing stories about feeling invisible, thanking me for representing them in mainstream advertising. Finally, someone who looks like my mother in a beauty ad. This is what confidence looks like at any age. She's more beautiful at 58 than most 25-year-olds. Thank you for showing us we don't have to disappear after 40. It's incredible. I murmured, reading message after message. I never expected this kind of response. You've tapped into something huge, Mira said, settling beside me with her own coffee. There are millions of women who have felt erased by advertising, by media, by society. You're giving them representation. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Gloria's name appeared on the screen. Veronica, I hope you're sitting down, she said without preamble. We've had 17 inquiry calls this morning. 17. Fashion brands, lifestyle companies, even a major cosmetics line that wants to discuss an ambassadorship deal. This is surreal, I said, looking at Mira, who was grinning like a proud parent. It gets better. Modern Icon wants to move your cover story up again. They're making you their September issue. And Jasper wants to know if you'd be interested in a recurring column about fashion and lifestyle for mature women. I felt dizzy with possibility. Gloria, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you're ready to be the face of a movement. Because, honey, whether you planned it or not, that's exactly what you've become. After I hung up, Mira and I sat in stunned silence for a moment. Do you realize what's happening? She finally said. 6 weeks ago, you were a discarded wife hiding from the world. Now you're about to be on the cover of a major fashion magazine, with brands fighting over you. It doesn't feel real, I admitted. I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake. The only mistake was letting Charles convince you that your value had expired, Mira said fiercely. You're the same brilliant, beautiful, fascinating woman you always were. The world is just finally paying attention. That afternoon, I drove to Leela's apartment in West Hollywood. My daughter had been following my sudden career development with a mixture of pride and amazement, but I wanted to talk to her face to face about what was happening. I found her in her studio space, working on sketches for what looked like a new collection. Her walls were covered with photographs from magazines, including several shots from my skincare campaign. Mom, she said, looking up from her drawing tablet, please tell me you're not here to ask if this is all too crazy, because I will not let you back down now. I laughed, settling into the chair beside her desk. Actually, I wanted to ask what you think about me becoming the face of something bigger. This seems to be turning into more than just modeling. Leela set down her stylus and turned to face me fully. You want to know what I think? I think you've found your purpose. For my entire life, I watched you shrink yourself to fit Dad's vision of what a wife should be. You were brilliant at your magazine job, but you gave it up to support his career. You had your own dreams, but you put them aside to manage his image. I made those choices willingly. I protested. Did you? Or did you make them because that's what you thought was expected? Leela's voice was gentle but firm. Mom, I've seen the response to your campaigns. You're not just modeling clothes or skincare, you're giving women permission to be visible, to take up space, to refuse to disappear just because they're not 25 anymore. She pulled up her Instagram feed, scrolling through post after post of women sharing their own stories, their own photographs, their own refusal to accept invisibility. You started something, she said. The question is, what are you going to do with it? That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the sketches and mood boards from my secret fashion brand project. For the first time in months, I pulled out my designs, looking at them with fresh eyes. The pieces I'd imagined sophisticated, elegant clothes for women who had lived and learned suddenly seemed not like a pipe dream, but like a possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Saw the skincare campaign. You're luminous. Dinner. To celebrate? I found myself smiling as I typed back, yes. And I have something I want to show you. As I prepared for my evening out, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I was still getting to know, confident, purposeful, unafraid to take up space. She was 58 years old, newly divorced, and just getting started. Hello, Veronica, I whispered to my reflection, just as I had weeks ago. But this time, the greeting felt like a promise rather than a question. The September issue of Modern Icon hit newsstands on a Tuesday morning in August, and by noon, my life had changed forever. I was in Gloria's office, going over potential booking details for a luxury watch campaign, when her assistant burst through the door without knocking. "Gloria, you need to see this," Maya said, her eyes wide with excitement. "The magazine, it's everywhere." She handed Gloria her phone, showing the Modern Icon Instagram account. The cover image me, photographed by Eli in a crisp white blazer against a stark background, my silver hair styled in loose waves, my eyes looking directly at the camera with what the photographer had called quiet power, had been posted 2 hours ago and already had over 200,000 likes, but it was the comments that took my breath away. "This is the most beautiful cover I've ever seen, finally. A magazine that represents real women. I'm 52 and this makes me feel seen for the first time in years. She's more stunning than any 20-year-old model. This is what confidence looks like." Gloria scrolled through the endless stream of responses, her expression shifting from surprise to something approaching awe. "Maya, get Jasper on the phone," she said, "and check the newsstands in Beverly Hills. I want to know if they're selling out." Within an hour, we had our answer. The magazine was selling faster than any September issue in Modern Icon's history. The online version had crashed the website twice due to traffic. Fashion blogs, news outlets, and social media influencers were all sharing the cover, calling it everything from revolutionary to long overdue to the image that changed fashion forever. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Interview requests from Good Morning America, The Today Show, Entertainment Tonight. Booking inquiries from brands I'd only dreamed of working with during my magazine days. A literary agent wanting to discuss a book deal about aging with grace in a youth-obsessed culture. "This is unprecedented," Jasper said when he called that afternoon. "We've had to go to a third printing. The digital edition is our highest-selling single issue in the magazine's history. Veronica, you've become a phenomenon." But it wasn't just the commercial success that overwhelmed me, it was the personal response. My email inbox filled with messages from women around the world sharing their stories. A 67-year-old widow in Ohio who said my cover gave her courage to start dating again. A 45-year-old executive in London who had been considering cosmetic surgery but decided to embrace her natural beauty instead. A 52-year-old teacher in Minneapolis who showed her students that beauty comes in many forms and ages. "Thank you for showing us we don't become invisible after 40. I bought 3 copies, one for me, one for my mother, one for my daughter. You've given me permission to be proud of my age instead of ashamed of it." Leela came over that evening, bringing takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of champagne. "Mom, do you understand what you've done?" she said, settling beside me on the couch as we scrolled through the continuing flood of responses. "You've started a revolution." "It's just a magazine cover," I protested, though even I was beginning to understand that it was something much bigger. "It's never just anything when it challenges the status quo," Leela replied. "You've made it acceptable, no, aspirational to be a woman over 50 in fashion. Do you know how many designers are probably scrambling right now to create collections for mature women?" As if summoned by her words, my phone rang. Gloria's name appeared on the screen. "Veronica, I need you to sit down for this one," she said. "I just got off the phone with Catherine Dubois from Maison Laurent. They want you as the face of their new fragrance campaign. They're talking about a multi-million-dollar contract." Maison Laurent, one of the most prestigious luxury brands in the world, known for featuring only the most elite models and celebrities in their campaigns. I felt the room spinning. "There's more," Gloria continued. "Vogue wants to feature you in their November issue. And Bergdorf Goodman wants to create a capsule collection with your input, Timeless by Veronica Hale." After I hung up, Leela and I sat in stunned silence. "A Vogue feature," I finally said. "I used to compete with Vogue when I was running Essence and Style. I never imagined being in it." "You're not just in it," Leela pointed out. "You're shaping it. You're proving that fashion doesn't have to worship youth exclusively." The implications of what was happening began to settle over me. This wasn't just about my personal reinvention anymore. I had become the symbol for something much larger. The response to the magazine cover had revealed a massive, underserved market of women who had been ignored by fashion and beauty industries for decades. But with that realization came responsibility, and with responsibility came pressure. Over the next few days, the attention intensified. Fashion Week was approaching, and suddenly everyone wanted to know if I would be walking runways. attending shows, making appearances. The fashion press began speculating about what my success meant for the industry's relationship with age and beauty. Not all the attention was positive. A particularly vicious fashion blogger wrote a piece titled "The Mature Model Trend: Inspiration or Desperation?", questioning whether my success was genuine or just a publicity stunt. A competing magazine ran an editorial about age-appropriate fashion choices, featuring unflattering paparazzi shots of older actresses alongside my cover image, clearly implying that I was somehow different, more acceptable than other women my age. Ignore them, Mira advised during one of our daily check-ins. They're just threatened because you're changing the rules of their game. But the criticism stung more than I wanted to admit, particularly when it came from other women. A prominent fashion critic in her 40s wrote a piece suggesting that the mature model trend was tokenism, that one older face on a magazine cover didn't address the systemic ageism in fashion. She wasn't entirely wrong, and that's what bothered me most. Maybe I should address it, I said to Eli during dinner at a quiet restaurant in Santa Monica. We'd been seeing each other regularly since the magazine cover came out, our relationship developing naturally from professional collaboration to something deeper and more personal. Maybe I should acknowledge that I'm just one person, not a solution to decades of discrimination. Or maybe, Eli said, reaching across the table to take my hand, you should focus on being the best version of yourself and let your success speak for itself. You can't solve systemic ageism single-handedly, but you can prove that there's beauty, power, and commercial value in representing real women. His touch was warm, reassuring, and I realized how much I'd come to depend on his perspective, his steadiness in the chaos my life had become. I never expected this, I admitted. When I walked in Leela's fashion show, I thought I was just helping my daughter. I never imagined it would lead to all this. The best transformations usually start accidentally, he said. We think we're just taking one small step, and suddenly we're somewhere completely new. Are you speaking from experience? I'm speaking about watching you become who you were always meant to be, he said quietly, and wondering if you're ready for what comes next. What comes next? He smiled, but there was something serious in his expression. Fashion Week, runway shows, the Maison Laurent campaign shoot, a level of visibility that will make this past month look quiet. I considered that, looking out at the ocean beyond the restaurant's windows. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and I thought about how much my life had changed since that terrible night when Charles had announced he was leaving me. 6 months ago, I thought my story was over, I said. I thought the best years of my life were behind me, and now I think they might just be beginning. But even as I said the words, a part of me wondered if I was strong enough for the scrutiny that would come with being the poster child for mature beauty in fashion. The magazine cover had been exhilarating, but it had also revealed the intense pressure that came with representation. Later that night, alone in my house, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and really looked at myself. The same face that had appeared on the cover of Modern Icon looked back at me, but in the harsh bathroom lighting, I could see every line, every imperfection, every year that separated me from the traditional beauty standards of fashion. For the first time since this journey began, I felt a flutter of genuine fear. Not about failure, the success had already exceeded my wildest expectations, but about sustainability. Could I maintain this level of confidence under constant scrutiny? Could I continue to represent something I was still learning to believe about myself? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your cover. You look incredible. Charles is an idiot. Teshai stared at the message for a long moment, surprised by the unexpected support from the woman who had replaced me in my ex-husband's life. It was a reminder that the story was bigger than my personal grievances, bigger than divorce and betrayal and revenge. Women everywhere were looking at my image and seeing possibility instead of limitation, seeing beauty instead of expiration dates. The responsibility of that representation was daunting, but it was also the most important work I'd ever done. I typed back, "Thank you. You're braver than you know." Then I turned off my phone, looked at myself in the mirror one more time, and smiled. Not the practiced, perfect smile of a model, but the real, slightly imperfect smile of a woman who was finally learning to like what she saw. The photographer's name was Victor Kaczynski, and he had the reputation for creating images so stunning they could launch careers or destroy them with equal precision. When he requested me specifically for a high-fashion editorial spread for International Style magazine, Gloria warned me that he was notoriously difficult. He's brilliant, she said as we drove to his downtown studio. But he's also known for being intense. He pushes models to their breaking point to get the shot he wants. How intense? I asked, adjusting the collar of my blazer nervously. He once made Jaceel cry during a shoot. Twice. The studio occupied an entire floor of a converted warehouse, with soaring ceilings, industrial lighting, and an atmosphere that felt more like an art installation than a workplace. Victor himself was smaller than I'd expected, compact, sharp-featured, with pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything and approve of very little. So, he said, looking me up and down with clinical assessment, you are the woman who thinks she can model at nearly 60. The dismissiveness in his tone was immediate and cutting. I felt my confidence, so carefully built over the past months, begin to waver. I'm Veronica Hale, I said, extending my hand. He ignored it. I know who you are. The question is whether you know what you're attempting. He circled me slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. Fashion photography is not a charity. It is not about making women feel good about themselves. It is about creating images that transcend reality. I understand that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you? Because everything I've seen of your work so far is very safe, very lifestyle, very celebrate your age. This is high fashion. This requires something different. He gestured to his assistant, who brought over a rack of clothes avant-garde pieces in severe blacks and whites, architectural shapes that looked more like sculptures than garments. We're shooting the mathematics of beauty, Victor explained. The concept is that true elegance is about perfect proportions, timeless geometry. Youth is irrelevant, but perfection is everything. The first outfit was a structured white dress that felt like wearing armor. The makeup artist, a silent, efficient woman, created a look that was more mask than enhancement. Stark white foundation, sharp black lines around my eyes, lips painted to match the dress exactly. Too soft, Victor said the moment I stepped in front of the camera. I need severity. I need angles. I need you to look like you were carved from marble. I tried to adjust my posture, my expression, but nothing seemed to satisfy him. No, 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 he said, his voice rising with frustration. You're posing like you're selling face cream to suburban housewives. This is art. This requires commitment. The criticism continued for hours. Every pose was wrong, every expression inadequate, every attempt to embody his vision fell short. I could feel my confidence cracking with each harsh comment, each dismissive gesture. Perhaps we should take a break, his assistant suggested after a particularly brutal series of rejections. No, Victor snapped. We continue until we get something usable. If we get something usable. The breaking point came during a shot where I was meant to be seated in an angular chair, my body positioned at precise angles to match the geometric pattern of the dress. I'd been holding the pose for several minutes while he adjusted lights and barked instructions, my muscles screaming from the unnatural position. Your face, he said suddenly. It's wrong. You look like you're in pain. I am in pain, I replied, my voice strained. Then don't. Pain is not beautiful. Suffering is not elegant. If you cannot transcend physical discomfort to create beauty, then perhaps your career change was premature. Something inside me snapped. All the confidence I'd built, all the progress I'd made in learning to value myself, it all crumbled under the weight of his relentless criticism. I need a break, I said, standing up from the chair despite his protest. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror, at the harsh makeup, the architectural dress that made me feel like a mannequin, the exhaustion and defeat in my eyes. For the first time since this journey began, I saw what Victor saw, an older woman playing dress up in a young person's game. The tears came suddenly and uncontrollably. All the fear I'd been suppressing, all the imposter syndrome I'd been fighting, all the doubt about whether I really belonged in this world, it all poured out in ugly, mascara-streaking sobs. A knock on the door interrupted my breakdown. Veronica? Eli's voice was gentle but concerned. Maya called me. She was worried about you. I opened the door, not caring that my face was a mess of smeared makeup and tears. Eli took one look at me and immediately wrapped me in his arms. What happened? I can't do this, I said into his chest. I thought I could, but I can't. He's right, I'm just a middle-aged woman pretending to be something I'm not. Who said that? Victor. And he's not wrong. I don't belong here. I don't have the strength for this kind of scrutiny, this kind of criticism. Eli pulled back to look at me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "Let's get you out of here," he spoke briefly to Victor's assistant, then guided me out of the studio and into his car. We drove in silence to a small cafe overlooking the ocean, where he ordered coffee and sat across from me while I tried to piece together what was left of my confidence. "Victor Kaczynski is known for being brutal," he said finally. "He breaks down models because he believes vulnerability creates better art. It's not about you personally, it's about his process." But what if he's right? What if I am just kidding myself? Eli reached across the table and took my hands. "Can I tell you why I left fashion photography for 2 years?" I nodded, grateful for any distraction from my own spiraling thoughts. I was shooting a campaign for a major cosmetics brand. The model was 19, beautiful, everything the industry wanted. But the creative director kept asking for more retouching, make her thinner, make her skin more perfect, make her eyes larger. By the end, we had created an image of a woman who didn't exist anywhere in nature. He paused, looking out at the ocean. That night, I went home to my apartment and realized I couldn't look at any of the photographs on my walls. I had spent 15 years creating impossible standards of beauty, convincing women they weren't enough as they were. I was part of the problem. "So you stopped?" I stopped, and I traveled, and I thought about what I actually wanted to say with my work. When I came back, I decided to photograph real beauty, complicated, imperfect, authentic beauty. Women like you. But what if Victor is right? What if there's a difference between lifestyle photography and high fashion? What if I don't have what it takes for the real fashion world? Eli was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "I want to show you something." He scrolled to a photograph, not one of his professional shots, but a candid image he'd taken of me between takes during our first shoot together. In it, I was looking off to the side, laughing at something someone had said, completely unguarded and natural. The light caught my hair, the lines around my eyes spoke of decades of laughter, and there was something luminous about the entire image. "This is what real beauty looks like," he said softly. "Not the artificial perfection Victor is chasing, but authentic humanity. You have something most models spend their entire careers trying to find: genuine presence, depth, the kind of beauty that comes from having lived fully." I studied the photograph, trying to see what he saw. "The fashion industry has spent decades convinced that youth is the only currency that matters," he continued. "But you're proving that's not true. Your success isn't a fluke, it's the market responding to something genuine that's been missing." Then why did today feel so devastating? Because you let one person's narrow vision of beauty make you forget your own worth. Victor sees fashion one way, but there are dozens of other photographers, editors, and brands who see it differently. The question is, are you going to let one difficult shoot derail everything you've built? As he spoke, I felt something shift inside me. The devastation was still there, but underneath it was something harder, more determined. I thought about all the women who had written to me after the magazine cover, who had shared their own stories of feeling invisible or dismissed. I thought about Leela's pride, about Gloria's investment in my success, about the brands that were lining up to work with me. "No," I said finally, "I'm not going to let him derail anything good, because I have an idea." He leaned forward, his eyes bright with the same intensity I'd seen when he first proposed photographing me. "What if we create our own editorial spread? Something that shows fashion doesn't have to be cold and geometric and perfect. Something that celebrates the kind of beauty you represent. Where would we publish it?" "Leave that to me. I have some ideas." As the sun set over the ocean, we talked about concepts, about the kind of images we wanted to create, about the story we wanted to tell. By the time we left the cafe, the devastation of the morning felt like something that had happened to someone else. Eli walked me to my car, and as I fumbled with my keys, he reached out and gently touched my face. "You're extraordinary, Veronica," he said quietly. "Not despite your age, not as some inspiring example of aging gracefully, but because you're you. Because you have substance and depth and a kind of beauty that can't be manufactured." Before I could respond, he kissed me, not the polite, careful kiss I might have expected, but something deeper, more passionate, full of months of growing attraction and respect. When we broke apart, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, desired, not as an ornament or an accessory, but as a woman worth wanting. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Now you remember who you are," he said. "And tomorrow, we start creating something beautiful." As I drove home, I thought about the woman who had walked into Victor's studio. That morning, still somewhat fragile, still seeking approval, still vulnerable to the criticism of others. She wasn't gone entirely, but she was being replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that her value didn't depend on anyone else's validation. The modeling industry could be brutal, as today had proven. But I was learning that I was more resilient than I'd realized, more capable of weathering criticism and bouncing back from setbacks. Charles had called me past my prime, but sitting in traffic on the Pacific Coast Highway, still tasting Eli's kiss on my lips, still feeling the warmth of his belief in me, I realized that prime wasn't about age, it was about authenticity, about courage, about the willingness to keep growing and changing and becoming. And by that definition, I was just getting started. The idea came to me at 3 a.m, jolting me awake with the kind of clarity that only arrives in the quiet hours when the rational mind finally stops interfering with possibility. A runway show. Not just any runway show, one that would shatter every assumption the fashion industry held about beauty, age, and relevance. A show featuring exclusively women over 45, wearing designs that celebrated rather than disguised their maturity, photographed by someone who understood that beauty deepened rather than diminished with experience. I sat up in bed, reaching for the notebook I kept on my nightstand, and began scribbling in the dark. By dawn, I had filled 12 pages with concepts, themes, potential participants, and logistics. By the time I called Gloria at her office that morning, I had what felt like a complete vision. "You want to do what?" she asked, and I could hear both excitement and concern in her voice. "A revolutionary runway show for LA Fashion Week," I repeated. "Moderna presents Primetime, a celebration of women who refuse to become invisible. Leela designs the clothes, Eli shoots it, Mira handles the PR. We show the industry that mature women aren't just a market segment to be ignored, we're a force to be reckoned with." There was a long pause. "Veronica, Fashion Week slots are booked years in advance. The cost alone, venue, production, models, marketing, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then we make it impossible to ignore. We create something so compelling, so necessary, that they have to find room for us, and if they don't, then we create our own platform. We've already proven there's an audience for this message. Now we give them a statement they can't dismiss or overlook." Gloria was quiet for another moment. "Come in this afternoon. Let's talk specifics." 2 hours later, I sat in Gloria's conference room with a presentation that would have made my magazine editor days proud. I had mock-ups, budget projections, a list of potential models from Moderna's roster, and a clear vision of what this show could accomplish. "The theme is prime time," I explained, clicking through my slides. "Not aging gracefully or silver sophistication, those phrases still suggest that being older is something to be managed or softened. Prime time suggests that this is our moment, our peak, our time to shine." Gloria studied the financial projections with the sharp eye of someone who had built a successful business from nothing. "These numbers are ambitious but not impossible. What makes you think LA Fashion Week will give us a slot?" "Because they can't afford not to," I said, pulling up the social media analytics from my magazine covers and campaigns. "The mature luxury market represents over $2 trillion in spending power annually. Fashion Week has been ignoring the fastest growing, highest spending demographic in their audience." "You've done your homework," Gloria admitted. "What does Leela think about designing an entire collection for this?" I haven't asked her yet. I wanted to make sure we had a real plan before I involved her. "And Eli? Mira?" "Same. But I think they'll be as excited as I am about the possibility of changing the conversation permanently." Gloria closed my presentation and leaned back in her chair, studying me with the same intensity she probably used to evaluate potential models. 6 months ago, you walked into my office as a woman who had just discovered her ex-husband was trading her in for a younger model," she said. "Now, you're proposing to revolutionize one of the most conservative industries in the world. What changed?" I considered the question, thinking about the journey from that first devastating night with Charles to this moment of absolute certainty about what needed to happen next. I stopped asking for permission. I said simply, I stopped waiting for other people to validate my worth or give me opportunities. I started creating them. Good answer. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning, negotiations, and what Mira called strategic insurgency. Getting a slot at LA Fashion Week required a combination of industry connections, financial commitments, and what amounted to a full-scale campaign to prove that our concept was both commercially viable and culturally necessary. Jasper from Modern Icon became an unexpected ally, using his influence with the Fashion Week board to advocate for our show. Several major brands, including the skincare company from my first campaign, offered sponsorship support. Most importantly, the response from Moderna's roster of models was immediate and enthusiastic. "I've been waiting my entire career for something like this," said Carmen Rodriguez, the 73-year-old former model who had become one of Moderna's biggest successes. "The chance to walk in a show that celebrates who I am now instead of who I used to be." Leela's response was even better than I'd hoped. When I presented the concept to her, her eyes lit up with the kind of creative excitement I hadn't seen since she was a child discovering art supplies for the first time. "Mom, this is brilliant," she said, immediately pulling out her sketchpad and starting to draw. "I've been working on pieces for mature women anyway, clothes that acknowledge that bodies change, that comfort and elegance aren't mutually exclusive, that power dressing doesn't end at menopause." Within days, she had preliminary sketches for an entire collection. Flowing pants that flattered every figure, blazers with unexpected details that added interest without trying too hard to be young, dresses that worked for board meetings and dinner dates with equal sophistication. "The line is called Prime," she announced, showing me a logo treatment that was both elegant and modern. "And I want you to be the finale model." Eli's contribution went beyond photography. When I explained the concept to him over dinner at our favorite Santa Monica restaurant, he immediately began talking about lighting schemes, staging concepts, ways to capture not just the clothes but the emotion of the moment. "This could change everything," he said, his hands already sketching camera angles on a napkin. "Not just for your career, but for the entire industry's relationship with age and beauty. You think we can pull it off?" "I think you've been pulling off the impossible since the day I met you," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "The question is, are you ready for what happens after we succeed?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, once you do this, once you prove that mature women can command attention and drive sales and change cultural conversations, you become more than a model. You become a movement leader. Are you ready for that level of responsibility?" I looked out at the ocean beyond the restaurant's windows, thinking about all the women who had written to me, who had seen my magazine covers and campaigns and felt seen for the first time in years. The responsibility was daunting, but it was also exhilarating. "I'm ready," I said. The Fashion Week board's response came 3 weeks later. We had been allocated a prime Saturday evening slot, contingent on meeting specific attendance and media coverage benchmarks. It was both an opportunity and a challenge: succeed spectacularly, or risk making the entire mature beauty movement look like a failed experiment. "No pressure," Mira said dryly when I called to share the news. "Just the future of age-inclusive fashion resting on one runway show." But as the date approached, something unexpected happened. Ticket demand exceeded every projection. The show sold out within hours of being announced. Fashion editors who had initially shown polite but lukewarm interest began calling to request priority seating. Social media buzz built to levels usually reserved for major celebrity appearances. Most importantly, women began sharing their stories. The hashtag #primetime became a rallying cry for women refusing to accept invisibility. Stories poured in from around the world: women starting new careers in their 50s, divorcing husbands who had written them off, launching businesses, traveling solo, falling in love again, reclaiming their bodies and their voices and their right to take up space. "You've tapped into something bigger than fashion," Mira observed as we reviewed the media coverage 3 days before the show. "You've given women permission to refuse to disappear." The final dress rehearsal took place on a Thursday evening, and seeing the show come together for the first time was breathtaking. 25 women, ages 45 to 82, wearing Leela's stunning collection. Each model had her own story, her own reason for being there, her own statement to make about beauty, power, and relevance. There was Janet Liu, 67, who had left her corporate law career at 65 to become a sculptor. Maria Santos, 51, who had started her own restaurant chain after her divorce. Dr. Sarah Chen, 74, who had published her first novel at 70 and was now working on her fourth. "These women aren't just models," Eli said, reviewing the lighting setup one more time. "They're proof that life gets more interesting, not less interesting, with experience." As I prepared for my finale walk, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror backstage. The dress Leela had designed for me was perfect, a flowing, meaty length creation in deep emerald silk that moved like water and somehow managed to be both sophisticated and sensual. My hair was styled in loose waves that embraced rather than hid the silver, and my makeup enhanced rather than disguised the lines that told the story of my 58 years. "You look like a queen," Leela said, appearing beside me in the mirror. "You look like someone who has earned every bit of her power." But the most unexpected moment came an hour before showtime, when my phone rang with a call from Charles. "Veronica." His voice was different and certain in a way I'd never heard before. "I saw the coverage about your fashion show. I wanted to talk." "This isn't really the time, Charles," I said, checking my makeup one more time. "I have a show in an hour." "I made a mistake," he said suddenly. "Leaving you, dismissing you, saying those things about being past your prime. I was wrong. Watching what you've accomplished, seeing how you've transformed yourself, it's incredible. Maybe we could." "Could what?" I interrupted, genuinely curious about what he thought was possible now. "Maybe we could try again. Start over." "I realize now what I lost when Charles," I said gently but firmly. "You didn't lose me. You discarded me. You decided my value had expired and traded me in for someone younger. That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. But you're different now. You're successful, confident. Everyone's talking about you. I'm the same woman I always was," I said. "The difference is that now I know my worth, and I won't accept anything less than complete appreciation for who I am. You taught me that lesson, actually, when you showed me what it felt like to be undervalued." There was a long silence. "Veronica, please, I have to go," I said, ending the call without malice but with finality. 5 minutes later, Eli appeared backstage, looking devastatingly handsome in his all-black photographer's uniform. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my expression. "Charles called," I said simply. "He wants to reconcile." Eli's jaw tightened slightly. And I told him no," I said, stepping closer to him. "Not because I'm angry, but because I'm happy. Happier than I've been in decades. Why would I go back to someone who only wants me now that other people value me?" "Good answer," he said, kissing me softly. "Now go show the world what primetime really looks like." The music started, a powerful orchestral piece that Mira had selected to convey both elegance and strength. As I waited in the wings for my cue, I could hear the audience's response to each model, the energy building with every walk. When my name was announced, I stepped onto the runway to an explosion of applause that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The lights, the music, the faces in the audience, all of it combined into a moment of pure electricity. But as I walked, I wasn't thinking about the audience or the cameras or the fashion critics in the front row. I was thinking about all the women who had written to me, who had shared their stories, who had found courage in my journey. I was walking for them, but more than that, I was walking as them, as all of us who had been told we were past our prime and had decided to prove otherwise. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 5 minutes. The morning after the show, I woke up to a world that had changed overnight. My phone had died sometime around AM from the constant stream of notifications, messages, and calls. When I plugged it in and turned it back on, the flood of responses was overwhelming. Text messages from friends I hadn't heard from in years, voicemails from reporters, emails from brands I'd only dreamed of working with during my magazine days. But it was Mira's text that made me understand the scope of what had happened. "Turn on GMA now." I fumbled for the remote and found Good Morning America, where entertainment correspondent Laura Spencer was standing in front of a giant screen displaying images from the show. "Last night in Los Angeles, fashion history was made," she was saying. "The primetime runway show, featuring exclusively models over 45, has been called everything from revolutionary to long overdue. But the numbers don't lie, this wasn't just a feel-good moment. It was a cultural phenomenon." The screen, filled with statistics, social media engagement that rivaled the Super Bowl, live stream viewership that crashed multiple platforms, and most impressively, immediate sales responses from the brands that had sponsored the show. The skincare company that featured several of these models reported a 400% increase in online orders overnight, Spencer continued. "Fashion retailers are scrambling to stock clothing lines that cater to mature women. And the woman at the center of it all, Veronica Hale, has reportedly received offers from major brands that could make her one of the highest paid models in the industry at 58 years old." The segment continued with clips from the show, interviews with audience members, and commentary from fashion industry experts who were calling it the moment fashion finally caught up to reality. My phone rang. Gloria's name appeared on the screen. "Have you seen the numbers?" she asked without preamble. "I just woke up." "What numbers?" "All of them. Every metric we track: social media engagement, website traffic, booking inquiries. We've had 17 brands contact us since midnight wanting to book models from the show." 17, Veronica. In 8 hours, I sank onto my couch, still processing the magnitude of what was happening. "It gets better," Gloria continued. "Maison Laurent wants to fast-track your fragrance campaign. Vogue is talking about a multi-page spread featuring the entire cast from the show. And I just got a call from the creative artists agency. They want to discuss representation for speaking engagements, book deals, potentially a documentary about your journey." "This is surreal," I managed to say. "This is business," Gloria corrected. "This is what happens when you tap into something real that people have been hungry for. The question now is, what do you want to do with it?" Before I could answer, someone was knocking at my door. Through the window, I could see Leela practically bouncing with excitement. "Mom," she said the moment I opened the door. Did you see everything?" She burst into my living room, laptop in hand, pulling up website after website showing coverage of the show. Fashion blogs, mainstream news outlets, international publications. Everyone was talking about prime time and what it meant for the future of fashion. "Look at this," she said, clicking to her own website. "I've had over 50,000 visitors since last night." 50,000. "And the pre-orders for the Prime collection, Mom. I'm going to have to find a manufacturer immediately. Orders? 800 pieces. In one night. I launched the collection at midnight with a coming soon notice, and women are already placing orders without even knowing delivery dates." She turned the laptop toward me, showing a flood of comments and inquiries. "This is beyond anything I dreamed possible." We spent the next hour scrolling through responses, not just sales numbers and media coverage, but personal stories. Women sharing photographs of themselves, talking about feeling visible for the first time in years, discussing career changes and divorces and new relationships and adventures they'd been afraid to attempt. A T52, I'm going back to school for my master's degree. Bought my first bikini in 10 years after watching this show. Filed for divorce this morning. Life's too short to be with someone who makes you feel invisible. Started my own business at 47. This show reminded me that I'm just getting started. We did this, Leela said softly, reading over my shoulder. We gave them permission to stop apologizing for existing. My phone rang again. This time it was Eli. "Are you seeing this?" he asked. "I'm trying to process it all. It's overwhelming. The photographs from last night are getting picked up everywhere. The Times wants to license the entire series. National Geographic is interested in a feature about redefining beauty standards. Veronica, this is bigger than fashion. This is cultural change in real time. Can you come over?" I asked. "I need someone to help me think through what happens next." "I'm already on my way." An hour later, Eli arrived with coffee, pastries, and a stack of newspapers from around the country. Almost all of them featured images from the show on their front pages or lifestyle sections. "I've been photographing fashion for 20 years, he said, settling beside me on the couch. "I've never seen a single event generate this kind of response. Not from celebrities, not from major designers, not from anyone. Because it wasn't really about fashion, was it?" I said, looking at the photographs he'd taken. "It was about representation, about refusing to disappear. It was about you," he said quietly. "About what you represent and what you've given other women permission to believe about themselves." We were interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Mira, carrying what appeared to be a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who had been up all night fielding calls. "We need to talk," she said. "All of us. About what happens next, about opportunities, about the fact that you've accidentally become the most influential woman in fashion. Accidentally? Okay, not accidentally. But I don't think you fully grasped that this would turn you into a global spokesperson for mature women everywhere. The offers I'm getting aren't just modeling contracts. They're asking you to be the face of campaigns about self-empowerment, about aging authentically, about refusing to accept society's limitations." She opened her briefcase and pulled out A folder thick with contracts, offers, and proposals. Cosmetics companies want you for anti-aging campaigns, but not to sell the idea of looking younger. They want to sell the idea of looking powerful at any age. Fashion brands want to create entire lines around your aesthetic. Publishers want books about your journey. Television producers want reality shows about mature women reinventing themselves. This is insane, I said, flipping through the documents. The numbers were staggering, not just the FEs being offered, but the scope of what people wanted me to represent. It's unprecedented, mirror corrected, but it's also an opportunity to create lasting change instead of just having a moment. What do you mean? Eli leaned forward. She means you could use this platform to build something permanent, not just capitalize on the attention, but create infrastructure that continues to support and represent mature women long after the headlines move on to something else. The idea was intriguing and terrifying in equal measure. For decades, I had built other people's careers, supported other people's dreams, managed other people's images. Now I had the chance to build something of my own, something that could outlast any individual campaign or magazine cover. What would that look like? I asked. A lot of different things, Mira said, pulling out another folder. Moderna wants to expand nationally and eventually internationally, with you as the public face of mature modeling. Several fashion schools want to create programs focused on designing for older women, with your input on curriculum. There's interest in a foundation that provides grants for women starting new careers after 50. And personally, Leela asked, what do you want, Mom? Not what the industry wants, not what would be good for the movement, but what would make you happy. It was the most important question anyone had asked me in this entire journey. What did I want? I want to keep creating, I said slowly. I want to tell stories, whether that's through modeling or writing or something else entirely. I want to help other women find their voices the way I found mine. And I want to do it with people I trust. People who see me as more than just a symbol or a trend. Eli reached over and took my hand. Then that's what we do. We build something sustainable that serves you and serves the women who have connected with your story. I asked, if you'll have us, he said. Leela's already proven she can design for this market. Mira understands the PR and business side better than anyone. I can document the journey, help tell the stories that need to be told. We could be a team. Looking around at these three people, my daughter who had believed in me before I believed in myself, my friend who had helped me navigate the business world, and the man who had seen beauty in me when I couldn't see it in myself. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the excitement of building something new with people I loved. Okay, I said, let's build something revolutionary. 6 months later, morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office in Beverly Hills, illuminating the photographs that line the walls, images from the prime time show, magazine covers, campaign shots, but most importantly, pictures of the women who had become part of what the media was calling the Veronica Hale revolution. At 59, I was busier than I had ever been, but it was a different kind of busy. Instead of managing someone else's career, I was building an empire of my own, one that served a community of women who had been ignored by fashion and media for far too long. The latest numbers from Moderna International, my assistant Sarah announced, placing a report on my desk. In the 6 months since the primetime show, Gloria and I had expanded her boutique agency into a global network with offices in New York, London, Paris, and Milan. We now represented over 300 women between the ages of 45 and 85, and our clients had booked more campaigns in the past year than the previous 5 years combined. But numbers, while gratifying, weren't what drove me anymore. It was the stories, like Margaret Chen, 62, who had been an accountant for 30 years before signing with our London office and becoming the face of a luxury travel campaign. Or Rosa Martinez, 71, who started modeling after her grandchildren saw my magazine cover and told her she was just as beautiful as the lady on TV. Or Jennifer Walsh, 47, who had been struggling with depression after her divorce until she saw the primetime show and decided to audition for our New York agency. She was now booking steady work and had started a blog about rediscovering confidence after heartbreak. My phone buzzed with a text from Leela. Ready for the big reveal? Can't wait to see your face when you see what we've created. Today was the launch of Prime Studio, our new creative incubator that combined Moderna's modeling agency, Leela's fashion line, Eli's photography collective, and Mira's PR firm under one umbrella. More than that, It was the unveiling of our new headquarters, a space designed specifically for women over 45 to explore creative careers, start businesses, and connect with others on similar journeys. The building itself had been my biggest investment, a former department store in West Hollywood that we'd converted into something unprecedented, a combination workspace, gallery, studio, and community center. The ground floor housed Leela's fashion showroom and a boutique featuring designs from mature women around the world. The second floor contained photography studios and offices for Moderna International. The third floor was dedicated to our foundation, which provided grants and mentoring for women starting over after 45. But it was the fourth floor I was most proud of, a community space with a cafe, library, and meeting rooms where women could gather, collaborate, and support each other's dreams. "Are you ready?" Eli asked, appearing in my office doorway with his camera in hand. Even after all these months, seeing him still made my heart skip slightly. Our relationship had deepened alongside my career transformation, built on mutual respect, shared creative vision, and a love that felt both passionate and sustainable. "I think so," I said, gathering my notes for the opening ceremony. "Though I still can't quite believe we pulled this off." "Believe it," he said, kissing me softly. "You've created something that's going to change lives for decades to come." The opening ceremony was held in the main gallery space, with over 200 people in attendance, models from Moderna's roster, fashion industry professionals, media representatives, and most importantly, women from the community who had been following our journey since the primetime show. A year ago, I began my speech, looking out at the audience. I was a woman who thought her story was over. My husband had left me for someone half my age, telling me I was past my prime. I felt invisible, irrelevant, forgotten. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. So many of these women had experienced similar moments of dismissal, similar feelings of obsolescence. But what I learned is that being discarded can be the beginning of being discovered. What I learned is that prime isn't about age, it's about authenticity, about courage, about refusing to accept other people's limitations on your potential. I gestured to the walls around us, covered with photographs of the women we now represented, the campaigns they'd booked, the lives they'd transformed. "This isn't just a business," I continued. "It's a movement. It's proof that women don't become invisible after 40 or 50 or 60 or 80. We become more interesting, more complex, more beautiful, in ways that youth simply can't replicate." The applause was thunderous, but it was the individual faces in the audience that moved me most. Women who had found courage to pursue dreams they'd set aside, who had left unfulfilling marriages, who had started businesses, who had learned to see their age as an asset rather than a liability. After the formal ceremony, the space filled with the energy of a celebration. Leela's designs were being photographed and admired. Eli's latest exhibition was drawing crowds, and everywhere I looked, women were connecting, collaborating, sharing stories and dreams and plans. "How does it feel?" Gloria asked, appearing beside me as I watched the bustling activity. "Surreal," I admitted. "A year ago, I was sitting in my empty house wondering what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. Now you're changing the world," she finished, "one fabulous woman at a time." As the evening wound down, I found myself on the building's rooftop terrace with Eli, looking out over the lights of Los Angeles spread below us. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping his arm around my waist. "About what?" "About Charles. About the marriage ending. About taking this path instead of trying to rebuild what you had before." I considered the question seriously. The woman I'd been a year ago had defined herself entirely through her relationship with Charles, had measured her worth by his success, had made herself smaller to accommodate his needs and ambitions. "No regrets," I said finally. "What Charles did to me was cruel, but it was also liberating. He forced me to rediscover who I was without him, and she turned out to be someone I actually like." "I love who she turned out to be," Eli said quietly. "Even though she's complicated and ambitious and probably way more high maintenance than the women you used to date." He laughed. "Especially because of that. I spent years photographing beautiful surfaces. Now I get to wake up next to someone with depth, intelligence, passion, and the kind of beauty that comes from having lived fully." "Is this the part where you tell me you have something important to ask me?" I teased, thinking of the small velvet box I'd glimpsed him hiding in his jacket pocket earlier. "Maybe," he said with a grin. "But first, I want you to see something." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo from earlier in the evening, me at the podium during my speech, arms raised in gesture, face animated with passion, silver hair catching the light. I looked powerful, confident, completely comfortable in my own skin. "This is what I see when I look at you," he said. "Not a woman who's aging gracefully or making the best of her situation, but someone who's in her prime, her real prime, the one that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of." As he spoke, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The devastation of Charles's betrayal, the terror of stepping onto that first runway, the gradual building of confidence through magazine covers and campaigns, and finally the creation of something lasting and meaningful. "You know what the best part is?" I said, leaning against him as we watched the city sparkle below us. "What?" "I'm just getting started." And it was true. At 59, I had never felt more alive, more purposeful, more excited about the future. The woman Charles had discarded as past her prime had become someone she never could have imagined, not despite her age, but because of everything that age represented. Prime, I had learned, wasn't about youth or perfection or meeting someone else's standards of beauty. Prime was about authenticity, courage, and the refusal to be diminished by other people's limitations. Prime was about becoming exactly who you were always meant to be, whenever you were brave enough to try. As Eli reached into his jacket pocket and dropped to one knee on the rooftop terrace, I realized that my story wasn't ending with this chapter, it was beginning. At 59, with silver hair and laugh lines and the accumulated wisdom of decades of living, I was finally, truly, absolutely in my prime. "Veronica Hale," he said, opening the small velvet box to reveal a ring that was both elegant and unconventional, perfectly us. "Will you marry me?" I looked down at this man who had seen me when I felt invisible, who had captured my beauty when I couldn't see it myself, who had believed in my potential when I was still discovering it. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "but only if you promise me something, anything. Promise me we'll keep changing, keep growing, keep becoming more ourselves instead of less. Promise me we'll never settle for safe or ordinary, or what other people think we should want." He slipped the ring onto my finger and stood to kiss me. The city of Los Angeles twinkling around us like a promise of adventures yet to come. "I promise," he said. "After all, we're just getting started." Epilogue. Years later, Veronica Hale Navarro was featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people for her work in age-inclusive fashion and media. Her memoir, Prime Time, A Second Act at Any Age, became a bestseller and spawned a documentary that won an Emmy for Outstanding Social Issue Documentary. The Prime Studio network had expanded to 12 cities globally, and the hashtag #Primetime had been used over 10 million times by women sharing their own stories of reinvention and self-discovery. But perhaps most importantly, millions of women around the world had learned that Prime wasn't about age, it was about the courage to become exactly who they were always meant to be, whenever they were brave enough to try. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.